Yeah, yeah, Marital Arts fam, we are back. We're gonna have some fun with this one because we get to talk about healthy communication. Am I communicating healthily right now?
Oh my gosh. And healthy conflict.
I thought I was communicating on that level. Like I gave her the look.
It's a lot of nonverbal communication
Listen, it worked. It
to
worked.
your wife when you were talking to the people.
To the
behind
people, sometimes you gotta, split the difference. But this is a great topic because one of the big challenges with not just marriage in general, but just goodness, life, exactly. It's figuring out a healthy way to be able to communicate, how to say what is on your mind in a way that can be received. So what are some of your weapons and tactics? Because I know you.
Dark fast.
Oh yeah, not dark. Listen, marital arts. We fight. We fighting in this thing. We fighting for the marriage. So how do you do it? Because you, babe, you know how to say something, and yeah, you say it to where I get it. But if I have any questions, there's you also know how to say it in a different way that allows me to get it. So give us the scoop. Give us the scoop.
That's so cute. So I'm a student. I study hard, all things at all times. And I'll never forget, I was working with a really brilliant woman once, and we would be having conversations where we were trying to understand one another. And when she didn't feel understood, she would repeat what she had just said verbatim. Like if I asked her to explain further, use the exact same words at a higher volume, a louder volume, and would clap her hands for punctuation. And after a few interactions with this, I was like, in my mind, I was like, how can I be instructive to her in a way that helps her expand on what is being said instead of repeating what is being said at a louder volume with hand claps. And we know this. You need to understand. So I developed this tactic with this person of tactic feels so
No, it's fine.
military, but of saying, can you say that using different words? And it was so simple, and we started practicing that, but it stuck with me. And so I think to answer your question is like the communication in marriage is not going to be different than your communication everywhere else. It's always just overflow.
Oh.
And so,
snap.
so the way that we communicate with our friends, our family, our coworkers, the people we encounter in life, the way we communicate with ourselves and with God are going to be the way that we communicate in marriage, and even more so because we're around that person all the time, whether we like it or not. If you're in a traditional, like, live together, for long seasons kind of marriage. And so studying, being self-aware, and I've always tried to be mindful of what I'm saying with my mouth and what I'm saying with the rest of, my personhood. And then picking up on that too. So speak.
Just said so much. I was just sitting here listening. That was my nonverbal communication, saying that I was listening to what she was communicating.
Gosh.
Caught that, right? So it was good. It was good. No, I love the thing that you just unpacked, which is so simple. Say it. How do you say it? Say it again.
Using different words.
Using different words. So the first time she hit me with this, I was so mad. Oh, I was heated. Why? Because first off, I thought I was communicating great to begin with.
You probably practiced it in your head first. I do that.
I was like, yeah, practice it in my head. It landed for me. I understood me when I said it to me. So why can't you understand me when I say it to you? Like, what's the problem? So the first time she hit me with this, I was immediately frustrated. One, because of the ego, but then two, what was funny was, and then it hit me. I said, this is why I'm frustrated, because I don't actually know what it is I'm trying to say. I think I know, and I think I'm saying what I'm saying, but I'm not. And so what I learned from that on the receiving end was, if you are in a space where you are communicating with your spouse and something needs to be said and you can't say it in more than one way, chances are you're not ready to communicate that thing yet. If you can only say it in one way and there's only a specific sequence of words, you got to say the same 5 or 6 words, the exact, and there's no other, you can't think of no synonyms. You ain't got a simile, some alliteration. I went grammatical, couldn't help it. But you have to learn different ways to communicate, because depending on your mood, depending on the environment, depending on the urgency, there has to be a different way to get a point across. Otherwise, it just won't land. Mm-hmm. And for me, I had to learn to pay attention to all the things I just mentioned because I want it to land, because I love our flow of communication. And when that flow is broken, I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like it because it says something.
It really does.
So yeah, I've learned that, and I love it, and I use it at times where I'm saying, all right, this is what I want to say to her. This is how I want to say it. Let me find a second way to say it. Let me find a third way to say it.
You still practice?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
And by that just meaning and this is what it does for me. It tells me if I can only communicate in one way, it ain't ready to be said yet. And I'll just hold that thing back. Okay. I'm not like, writing lines to recite to you, but just it tells me something. Like that's a process for me because I want our communication to be effective. I need it to flow like it does. And if there's something that I'm doing to interrupt that flow, I got to handle that.
That's so good. When you said you think of a few different ways to say it, and I was like, you practice. So something that I've had to unlearn, and that's a lot of a healthy communication, I think, is to use your definition, it was understanding and being understood. Right, is healthy. And I describe that because a lot of folks are like, healthy communication is when you use positive language and when you say X and when you do Y. And sometimes things are not positive, or they're difficult, or they're painful. And so it's important to give room for the fullness of what you're going to experience with anyone, whether it's your spouse or anyone who you have the safety to explore the human experience with, that it doesn't have to look one way, and that's really important. But the other part of it is that whatever that thing is, whether it's I'm enraged, and there's a way to talk about being enraged that is safe and healthy, or I'm just so moved. Some folks, and I learned this with our daughter this morning, sometimes we have as much difficulty communicating about the extremely positive parts of our lives as we do about the really, really dark, scary parts of our lives. And so being able to be understood in that space is what's important. And the idea that like you would rehearse it is, I won't say it's scary, but the idea is like you get through that stuff by being super present, by being self-aware enough, sober enough. Y'all, I used to be addicted to alcohol, and it took me a long time to get to the place where I could be sober enough to recognize when we were in a conversation if I was getting afraid or excited or happy or experiencing the full range of emotions, because I was out of touch with myself. I literally could not feel what was happening. And so being in a place where you're paying attention to how you are, being present enough to know what your body is saying, not just your mouth. You're not just talking with your lips and tongue. You're also speaking with your spirit. We've been in scenarios where, one of us is activated because we respond to what people say to us. So communication is all those things for you, but it's also paying attention to that from whoever you're speaking with. When you're activated and you respond to something someone says to you, it shifts. It shifts the room. And whether that's them becoming overjoyed or enraged, if you're mindful enough, you will sense it And part of healthy communication, and we'll get into talking about conflict resolution too, that's a huge part of it, is you have to respond to someone's shift in mood or emotional experience the same way that you would if they said something to you. And so we'll talk about that a little more, but I love having scripts and being able to say, like, okay, so when that happens, what do I even do? So speaking of all of the like atmospheric shifts and how your emotions change, we had a scenario where we were sitting on our couch at home. We were having a confrontation. We agreed to it. There's a whole process around this that we're going to explain to you guys, but we had agreed to have a conflict resolution session. We don't call it that. But he was sitting here, I was sitting here, and I said something to him, y'all, and he got mad, so mad. I had to get up and cross our living room, and I was sitting there, and I was kind of like waiting to see if he was going to acknowledge it. And he was just still mad.
Couldn't even, yep.
Finally, I was like, babe, I am now like 15 feet away from you where I was 3 feet. Are you mad? Because you... And part of communication is recognizing how something is going to feel to the other person when you say it. Don't nobody want you to ask them if you mad, son? Like, those are fighting words. So I was like, how are you feeling? and so we had that exchange. And I think eventually we tabled that and came back to it later.
Wisely did, yes.
Yeah, just talking through, and I know this is kind of all over the map, but talking through all of these parts of the experience, because communication is not just like, I know how to say those 5 words in 5 different ways. And I think part of what helps communication be healthy is when we're taking responsibility for all that stuff, because it's happening. And what's unhealthy is when you try to act like it's not. I ain't say it, you prove I'm mad.
That part right there, so much. I'm going to take the responsibility part and then wind my way back. Because that is a critical, essential part of communication, is just being willing to take responsibility for the effect that what you say having on someone else. Like, too many times I think we are like, I said it right, I woosad, you was in a right mood, and I said it the way the book told me to say it, so it should have had this response, and if it didn't, that's your fault. So now we're frustrated because we quote unquote said it right and it didn't go well, and it's at the end of the day, we have to take that responsibility in a given moment. Like, okay, I said this, she is upset. Yes, she's responsible for her emotions. However, I have said something that has triggered said emotion. I have a part in this communication. And so now I have to take notice of that and say, oh, when I say the words ice cream, that is a trigger. Perhaps I should not use the words ice cream in this particular way in these situations. And that's what communication is about. It's about learning, when I say these things, this is the effect. Cool. Maybe I have to think about how I use those words, or think about the particular situation in which I use them in. And so thank you for that, because too many of us are like, I said what I said, and that's what I meant, and that's just how it is, and it's up to you to figure it out. I'm like, wait, no, that's not a conversation. Now you're just yelling at people. And then,
I said what I said. Oh,
yes, I said. I know. I was there when you said it. That's why I'm having this reaction. Like, why you not restate that? Yes. Yeah.
I'll find the piece of recording, come back and say it again.
say it with different words. But I also wanted to unpack the self-awareness part of communication, because we're glad you brought up that example, because I remember this exact conversation. Because up until that point, I thought that I was the type of person, I had to learn this about myself, I smolder.
I do too.
Yes, you do too. Yeah, we both are smolderers.
And to be fair,
Yeah, go ahead, go.
we're all speaking a language. While we're speaking English, we're also speaking another speak. And for both of us, there was a people-pleasing language, there was a non-confrontational language, there is a smoldering language, and so we tend to find people who respond to those sub-languages that we speak. And so our little smoldering selves be white-hot in rooms together, mostly not at the same time. Because, yeah, inferno. But so go on. So you were smoldering.
I was smoldering. And I did not realize how obvious my smoldering was. So I'm thinking I'm keeping myself under control and I'm under wraps. Like she said it, and I was hopping. I'm like, I have my self-control. You know, I'm good.
The jaw twitching,
Meanwhile,
the vein
the steam is coming out of the vein, is right across the forehead. There's nobody is fooled. And so part of communication is recognizing how you communicate. I remember learning this in acting. There are people who have, and I'm one of them, very expressive faces. So it doesn't take much for someone with an expressive face to come across in an expressive way. They just need to have one thought and it's all over their face. And they don't need anything else to communicate. Then there are people who don't have that ability, who are very stoic. And so they think they are expressing a range of emotions and cannot figure out why people don't respond to them. And it's like, bruh, ma'am, your face is saying nothing right now. You may be communicating in your mind and you may be feeling the feels, but you aren't aware enough of your body and how you communicate to know it's not as obvious as you think to the other person.
Here's what's beautiful. While you were describing that stoicism, I hope as folks are listening that you're willing to challenge yourselves and to deconstruct things and to examine what you've assumed about yourself. Because what you just described, babe, is a lot of times not so much a God-given personality trait, but a protective response, a safeguard for the kid who was 5 years old, like me, who was super expressive and learned that when my little face looked mad, pain was going to happen. I was going to be hurt. And I say that not because I was ever, like physically assaulted or something, but if you're a child and you have enough experiences where a natural reaction creates a change in your environment that ultimately feels hurtful, like say you get mad and you scowl and your mom, and this is me because I'm a mom and I've done it to my kids and they had to tell me what I was doing before I fixed it. They'd scowl at me and I would just withdraw. I wouldn't make eye contact. I'd get very calm. And what I thought I was doing was not reacting in anger to them, but really it was just dehumanizing myself. And they weren't getting connection from me. And my little kids would be like, Mom, look at my eyes. And I'd be like, oh. And I'd eventually learn to reconnect. And they'd say, are you mad? Not taunting, but they'd say, are you upset? And I was able to pull myself out of that and recognize, oh, wow, I was in safety mode. I was in shutdown mode. And so I describe that because there are a lot of ways that we communicate that are learned, conditioned, like armor that kept us safe from having to get cussed out or having to have somebody walk away from us or having someone belittle us or bully us, that come into our relationships. And now when we're looking to just be in a safe relationship, you can just be. You don't have to worry about what's about to happen with your face, or if they can't hear you say, I'm angry, they're going to smash something. You can just be. And when you find that safe space, the next challenge is, okay, how am I now? Am I really just being, or are there things I'm putting on that I need to start to take off? And so there are layers that you can start to remove. And some of them might look like being stoic. Some of them might look like over dramatizing things, because that would make people around you laugh. And you were able to, a lot of times we'll respond by shrinking and trying to keep the peace. Other times we'll respond by getting bigger and performing and trying to create the peace, enjoy it that way. And so as you were talking about these responses, I want to make sure that folks know all that isn't, a part of your identity necessarily. It may be something that you get to explore now and adjust. So yeah, those are all parts of this communication thing. And we get to learn about that as we go.
And it is absolutely a learning process. I think that's one place I think we're going to land right there. At the end of the day, there is no absolutes with communication. It's about paying attention to what's happening with yourself, with the other person. I'll take one last sliver and add to it, creating a safe environment to communicate in.
Talk about that.
Oh my goodness, because your environment affects your communication too. You know, if you are not in a safe space, meaning the person that you're communicating with makes you feel afraid based on how they react or based on how they've treated others, based on how they've treated you, based on how they treat themselves, you will find that your communication is not as effective because your communication is stifled by fear, and you just cannot communicate as clearly when you are in a flight state or in a fearful state. And so your environment is important. If y'all want to have healthy communication, we'll sit down, have a nice calm conversation. Find somewhere where the two of you can sit down. If it's the couch, that's the calm space. If it's the yard, if it's the park, not only the environment, but also establishing that calm space between the two of you. I know you're at peace. I know I'm at peace. We're aware of each other being at peace. Let's have this conversation. But I'll do it in a second. I'll look at her and be like, okay.
She can't handle that.
Nope.
So I do want
and
us
vice
to
versa.
move. I want us to end up talking about conflict resolution.
Yeah,
healthy conflict resolution. But first, I want you to just put me on blast for the folks because I have been in the past that person that's like, oh my God, babe, you never shared your feelings with me. I want you to share your feelings with me. Tell me your deepest, darkest secrets. I want to hear the innermost.
All right.
Everything. And I just want you to,
Yeah.
That story.
I will jump on it. It's that, for the record, that has come. There's been a lot of growth in that area, but that's one of the number one, the responsibility for your words. Learn that. Seeing how your words land. Learn that too. But for me, realizing that part of the reason that one of your things is like, you don't talk about your feelings. You don't say how you feel. And I'm like, ooh, here's a problem. If I say how I feel and this thing blows up on me, now I got two problems. Because I still feel how I feel, but now I've been blown up on and now I got another feeling. So now I got two sets of feelings that I'm going to deal with. And so I found myself having to try to figure out how to make that work.
And I'm laughing because we've talked about this, but like, there's communication is like the lifeblood of our humanity. Like, other beings don't communicate to the depth we communicate with each other. Yeah. And because of that, there isn't like a single, like you were saying, there's no single right way to do this. But there are ways that we've internalized harm and gotten comfortable harming ourselves and other people. And what we're talking about is actually an instance of abuse. And I didn't want to like gloss over it because we're laughing and we figured this out and we literally had to call a safe person outside of our marriage and say like, hey, I need my husband to be able to text you SOS if I get out of line. Like, I'm not an abusive person, but there are things that I can do that are abusive. And so getting to a place where you can say, hey, I told you something and you gave me the silent treatment for 3 days. And that's not tolerable. That's what we were laughing about, but we've come to the place where we unpacked it and we're healing, and we've had instances where a couple days ago, I was like, babe, I'm about to give you the silent treatment again. Come over here so we can talk.
The heads up.
Like, we're figuring this out, but it can get that deep. And as much as we will go through the rest of the, like, put me on full blast, I want to make sure that there's room for people to be aware of what that looks like and to not, like, put yourself in the box. If it could never be me, I won't do that. I'm not such and such. That can happen, and there are ways to heal and be less harmful to ourselves and other people. But we have to be willing to say it and to recognize it. And so, sorry, you were telling the story.
No. You had to fill that in. No, do that.
That's not funny.
Do that. No. I'm glad you filled it in the way that you did.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, what I had to honestly just be like, okay, well, if this blow up is going to happen, it's going to happen. But I do need to express, listen, when I tell you things, there is an explosion that takes place. And this explosion it's not as self-contained as you may believe it is. It affects me, it affects the home, it affects everybody. And just being able to say that cleared so much of the air, because I don't even know that you necessarily realized how big the explosion was.
I thought I was protecting everyone from myself. I was like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to keep the smolder you were doing that moved me across the room. It was the same thing. And so, and yes, it was something that I observed growing up, but the bottom line was my approach was to care for the people I loved, and I didn't realize that by doing it, it was literally an act of violence. And so being able to talk about it and to listen. And by that point, I think I had demonstrated a couple times that I could listen without doing that.
Took a minute.
But yeah.
Yeah. And oh man, so much. Like, so much of communication. And I was just talking to my boy Be Free. Shout yourself out. Say what's up. There it is. We were just talking about how much of communication is nonverbal. And a lot of people think that silence is non-communicative, and it absolutely is communicative. I mean, if you think about the definition of silence, it is a break in noise. So at some point there was communication taking place, and then there is a stop. That's what that silence is. And that silence is a part of the communication as well. And so when she's talking about the silent treatment, it would very much be the reaction to the whatever conversation we had. And when you love somebody and you want to connect with them and you want to be with them all the time, that silence or that cutoff feels violent. And I didn't really have words to describe it. It took me a while to be able to communicate, because it would just make me frustrated, angry, upset, all the violent things, and then I would withdraw too to try to deal with it. So finally we had to sit down and say, all right, I've withdrawn to my corner, you've withdrawn to your corner, this is not getting solved, and now we're starting to drift further and further, and our communication was breaking up, kind of like a little walkie-talkie. You know, they get too far apart, all the distortion. That was us. Until we finally just sat down and said, all right, this is what this thing is. And so that's a huge part about communication, is at some point you have to say how you feel, and you have to address openly, honestly, how things are affecting you, knowing that there's so many different layers to it. Silence is a part of it. Your body language is a part of it. Your mood is a part of it. The environment is a part of it. There's all of these things that go into communication that isn't just what we say.
Yeah. And you have to trust that there's that the person you're communicating with, well, you have to trust that you're safe, regardless of what the other person is putting out. We'll talk a little more, I think, about, we'll get into like the nuts and bolts of conflict resolution, but we always have the tools to keep ourselves safe, you know, and if I were with someone who were, you know, the kind of person whose emotions get very dark very quickly and who might say things that are inconsistent or mean-spirited, I've learned to interact with those folks, because you talked about connection. And the aim here is like, how do I connect and communicate through the connection? Okay, when things turn, because you know with those folks, it will. So when it turns, what am I going to do? And there are all of these steps that you can take to keep yourself safe, keep yourself present and clear thinking, and then figure out how to stay safe. Are you going to sit there and communicate to them, hey, please don't talk to me that way? Or are they reacting poorly to that? Do you need to be like, hey, I need a minute, excuse me, I'm gonna go and we'll come back to this? There are steps you can take. So in that scenario, because we just described like having a conversation where you feel something and are not sure if it's safe to say it, I would encourage you, like, figure out the ways to keep yourself safe in the aftermath, and then say the thing. Say it with love, but communicate and take the steps to be assertive and to state like what you need to stay safe, so that the thing can get said. And then instead of trying to make the other person safe by not telling them, keep yourself safe and make sure that your voice is heard.
So we're gonna come back And when we come back, we're going to talk healthy conflict resolution.
Healthy confrontation.
Healthy
maybe.
confrontation. I don't even remember my own
Loving
titles.
confrontation.
Healthy confrontation. Cannot wait to jump into the rest of it. Marital Arts fam, find us in the chat. What did we hit on? What did we not hit on? We coming back with some more. Rock with us. Hit us on the socials. Got questions there? Got questions here? We're going to try to get as many of them answered as we can, because at the end of the day, we want us to fight more for the marriage than we do in the marriage. We're going to holler at you at the next one. Peace.